Good morning, everyone. On this somewhat chilly Thursday morning here, we have a bonus compliance webinar. A lot of you were at the seminar last week, which was a lot of fun and a beautiful day and sunny. And now we have cloudy and misty and cold. So, in any event, wish we could go back a week, but we're doing leave management mistakes today. And I am joined by Emily here. Emily is a guru at doing these types of webinars and trainings for clients. And so she's going to chime in from time to time. So we're very lucky to have her here with us this morning. This webinar, as most of you know who've hung out with us for a while, is eligible for an hour of SHRM credit. If you need it, that code will be sent out later. You are muted, but there's a Q&A box that you can put your questions in. And we do record these and we send everything out or post it within about a day of the seminar or webinar. So if you miss anything or you want to re-listen to it for some reason, you're going to have that opportunity. So this is a very timely topic as well. There's the introduction page. I got ahead of myself. This is a very timely topic today because, CTR is all about providing you with the best services we can. And those of you who've attended these webinars before, we often split this into a main topic with about 5 minutes at the beginning where we talk about any pertinent legislative court updates. And for those of you who may have seen this come out yesterday, Allegheny County is proposing paid parental leave. The 30-day public comment period started yesterday. There is a hearing on it. I think it's June 2nd. You really want to pay attention to that. It's 18 weeks of paid leave at the full rate plus benefits. That's a substantial paid leave policy or proposal by the government. And it applies to virtually all employers in Allegheny County who are either situated here or doing business in Allegheny County. And we don't have great definitions yet on what that means. And for those of you who have, again, hung out and heard some of the paid sick leave discussions about Allegheny County and Pittsburgh paid sick days, you will know that those laws apply to like the company that's in Butler, but has an employee who's working in Pittsburgh or Allegheny County. So if you have strong feelings about that proposal by Allegheny County, one way or another, now's your time to make your voice heard if you want to do that, because they are accepting public comments. And just in general, I think now's the time to think about this. We always want to be proactive, not reactive. There's no employer threshold size for this proposed legislation. So you want to think about how does that look? And while that's not the topic for today, I do want to point out that it is both whether there's a birth of a child, adoption, or placement of a child, which is quite broad. So that could be a foster care placement. It could be a grandchild who's placed. It could be the domestic partner's children who are placed. And both partners, it doesn't have to be spouses, get the leave. So I could get it. My husband could get it. If I had a domestic partner, they could get it if the husband's gone. So in any event, be on the lookout for that. Think about that. Think about how you would implement that. And of course, it's job protected leave. All right. So that could add a layer of complexity to this, but we're going to talk about the laws and regulations that we have to date, knowing that that may come down the pipe for those of us working and playing in Allegheny County here. So that's sort of everything that CTR offers. Many of you know that since you're existing clients. Where are we headed today? Well, we're going to assume some familiarity with leave laws, and we're going to talk about where you're most exposed because those are the areas you want to focus on. We're talking about leave overlap, which is a huge issue these days, given that you have the federal, state, and local laws all vying for your attention there. Intermittent leave challenges. I've never met an employer who loved intermittent leave, and it is often the bane of your existence. So we'll talk a little bit about that, some common leave management mistakes, and hopefully how to reduce some of the burden on you as the person who wears the HR hat and has to handle this. So, moving along. Why is it more complex than ever? Well, the employer always seems to be in the middle of everything, right? There you are, right there, dead center. And you've got the requirements of the law, which often there's a tension with your managers as to how you're applying that law, right? I've heard more than once managers be like, that can't possibly be the law. That can't possibly be right that I have to do X, Y, and Z to meet the law, obligations of the law with respect to my employees. And of course, you're a business. You have to be in business. If you don't make your product or your service or whatever, nobody has a job. So you have to be thoughtful of that. And of course, more and more, the idea of quality of life and vying for employees, there's competition to get the employees you want, can be an issue. So very complex legal requirements that don't always make sense. They may have made sense on paper, but applying them can be challenging to everyone. And again, if you have questions as we go forward here, most of you who know me, I'm a very casual speaker. Please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A, and Emily and I will try to answer them. If we get too many questions, we may hold some to the end, but please feel free to ask away. One other update. In addition to the paid parental leave in Allegheny County, they're now matching or trying to or have proposed to match their paid leave policy to Pittsburgh's, which, as you remember, took effect January 1 of this year and broadened the leave requirements and the amount of leave. Okay. Whole question here, and we're going to test my technology. What is your biggest challenge today? So hopefully, I have launched the poll, and we're going to see what we think about this. Tracking intermittent leave, yeah, that's challenging. All right, we're going to give it another 10 seconds or so here. Wow, they're all a problem. I figured out our poll for us. They're all a problem. Tracking intermittent leave, manager consistency. So the top two here that you've picked, and I think it's great to hear back from the folks who are doing this, are what I have seen. So those of you who know me, in my past life, I practiced for about a quarter of a century at a very large management side, labor and employment law practice within a huge firm. And so I retired from practicing law, but the top two right there, the tracking intermittent leave and manager consistency, would be where we saw the lawsuits coming from. Intermittent leave almost invariably frustrated employers and led to problems as to how it was applied and how they tracked it and just all that good stuff. And then manager consistency, not because the managers were bad guys or gals, but because they just wanted to get the job done, and they may not have had the training or education to know that they were stepping on landmines, basically, when they were trying to just get the job done. So, okay, thanks for participating in that. All right. So let's talk about, we're going to go through each one of these and talk about where your exposure is on each of these topics. So jumping in, inconsistent documentation. This happens in two ways. And the first is that the laws are inconsistent. The documentation differences between, and I just threw out three acronyms here, and I've got an extra L in the FMLA. What do you know? Lots of leave in the FMLA. Between that, which has strict deadlines for paperwork, the ADA, which requires that you provide leave as an accommodation if it's appropriate, has no deadlines except to say, you got to be reasonable. The FMLA has paperwork forms, the WH-380 series, as they call it, posted on the U.S. Department of Labor website. So the government hands you a gift, don't say no, and they give you the paperwork that you need, but the ADA doesn't. That's up to you to do that as the interactive process. The Pittsburgh Paid Sick Days Act, which there's also the Allegheny County, and if we go to Philadelphia, there's stuff over there. If you go to other states and localities, there's stuff. There's workers' comp, right? All of those laws have different paperwork. The Pittsburgh Paid Sick Days Act, as well as the Allegheny County sick leave law, prohibit us from getting documentation unless the leave is going for more than 3 consecutive days. Although it says we can still get the FMLA paperwork. That makes it really tough to manage that, right? Because one's got forms you use. One says, don't you dare get documentation from the person unless certain strict requirements are met. And one sort of just says, hey, it's up to you. And maybe you're sitting here thinking, well, I'm a lucky employer. I only have 10 employees. We've got the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act. Guess what that does? That mimics many of the federal laws, including the ADA. It mirrors them. And so even if you're a small employer, you may have to look at giving leave as an accommodation, which means that you have to have the right documentation in place to do that. This can also include COBRA if you have somebody on health benefits, depending on the type of leave and what you're doing with it. The other problem, and I have a wonderful war story for this, is the employer is inconsistent, right? So we have usually a timing issue. Sometimes you don't know if something's going to be FMLA or ADA leave or even workers' comp leave. And so you're not sure what to do with it. And the person is using time, maybe their PTO or something, and you're not sure how to handle it. Other times it's very obvious, or at least in most cases it is, that the leave is going to be FMLA leave. If I'm pregnant, I'm probably not hiding that. And you're probably going to be able to tell that we've got an FMLA coming up and what the date of that is. My war story on that, very, very, very large employer, close to 1,000 employees, had a policy that if you went out on leave, they wouldn't start FMLA for at least a week. And they'd let you use your PTO or whatever till they kind of figured out what was going on with the leave and whether you need the FMLA or not. That sounds reasonable, right? You can do that. That's okay. Except, who didn't they do that for? All the pregnant women. They said no. So if I was out for a broken leg or chemotherapy or mental health, it wouldn't matter. I would effectively get at least 13 weeks of leave because I would use my PTO first, or at least a week of that. But if I was pregnant, I was not allowed to do that because my leave date was supposedly, somebody's clearly never talked to infants, but supposedly my leave date was fixed. What does that result in? It's pregnancy discrimination, right? Because for the folks who are not pregnant, they get at least 13 weeks. But for me, I have to use my PTO concurrently from day one with the FMLA leave, which limits me then to 12 weeks. So you can get inconsistent documentation issues and timing issues with respect to how you treat different types of leaves. And there's ways to fix that. You can say, hey, we're going to essentially backdate FMLA leave if it's reasonable to do so. So maybe I don't know on day one whether it is FMLA leave or not, but we'll get the paperwork in and we're going to do it quickly. And then we may backdate the leave to that original date. Or we treat everybody the same and say, hey, everybody gets a week of PTO before we start running the FMLA. The other thing is, you're not running an HR business, you're running a business to produce widgets or whatever it is you're doing. And HR managers, everybody gets busy and they forget and they drag their feet sometimes. That includes your employees dragging their feet. And really, we should have expectations for them in leaves to prevent that. We should have somebody who's on them that says, hey, the 15 days to return the medical certification is over. Where is it? Why isn't it on my desk? Or we asked you for XYZ for an ADA leave and you didn't produce it. Where is it? And that's tough sometimes to follow up. Delayed responses. Again, the timeline goes sideways because people are busy and to err is human, right? And so you can see some of the prominent or relevant FMLA deadlines there. If you're sitting around saying, hey, I'm small, I'm not the FMLA employer, I am subject to the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act, the PHRA, so I might have to give a disability leave or something like that, but not necessarily the strident requirements of the FMLA, you still need to move in a timely fashion. Everything is judged, not by your fellow managers, but by the courts as to whether or not you're timely in what you're doing. And there was a case that came out a month or two ago that said, hey, if you employer aren't sort of with the program and quickly looking at ADA accommodations, which would include an ADA leave, then that is in of itself disability discrimination. That's a tough new case out there. So what does that mean? If the court, and again, it's the courts that judge this, not your coworkers or your fellow HR people who would understand that life happens, and you don't get on the ball and do this in a timely manner to respond to requests for accommodations, including leave accommodations, that is the equivalent of disability discrimination, even if the person doesn't ultimately lose their job. Tough case for employers. All right, intermittent leave challenges. Why companies hate this? Unscheduled call-offs, right? You didn't know it was happening. It's your busiest day. You were short-staffed to begin with, and good old Ann called off on you. Attendance confusion, right? Who's covering what's happening? It disrupts the production or service schedule, and recertification tracking, not just the leave itself, right? I'm missing an hour here and there. And if you're requiring me to take leave in more than an hour, that can be very problematic, both under the FMLA as well as the Pittsburgh and Allegheny County laws regarding paid leave. That's a bit of a pain in the you-know-what to track, right? As well as the recertification for any type of FMLA leave. Whatever that original certification said, if we accepted it, then we should be asking for a new certification when the time is right. Not before, but when the time is right. You get these examples that your production managers hate. Susie calls off 5 minutes after the shift started due to a medical problem for her step-grandfather. What do you do with that? Well, the first answer is going to be, it depends where you're located. If you're in Pittsburgh or Allegheny County, guess what that qualifies for? The Pittsburgh or Allegheny County Paid Sick Days Act, assuming she has the time accrued. Does it qualify for FMLA? No, but you're still got a situation. What kind of notice do the local laws require? Reasonable notice. Maybe this was reasonable because she didn't get the call. until 5 minutes before she was headed out the door, and she had to handle the ambulance crisis and whatever to help her step grandfather. We don't know. We will never know because under those two laws, we really can't ask for documentation yet. That's a huge problem. Do your managers like it? Do the people above you like it? No, but it is the law. And one of the important things here is you have to train your supervisors to recognize that if something like this happens, the right response is not to just pull the trigger on discipline or termination, but to run it up the flagpole. Because hopefully somebody has the training in your organization. And that's why we do these webinars to say, ooh, I think we have a problem. And maybe Susie adds to our headache that day and we bring in a replacement employee because, we have Bob, who's a good guy and always fills in. And then she shows up for her shift an hour later. But Bob's already come in and he thinks he's working the whole day. What do? We could still let Bob work the whole day, right? And I think there's some ethics there as to how we handle Bob. But with respect to Susie, in Allegheny County, as well as Pittsburgh, as well as the FMLA, in most circumstances, unless we have some PTO requirements there, the most we can force a leave is 1 hour. So she shows up after an hour, guess who's back on the clock? We cannot require her to take more leave than she needs. And those are problems. There's not going to be a silver bullet to fix those problems. The only solution is training so people recognize those problems. They just have to grin and bear it, but they also have to know to run it up the flagpole so that it gets treated appropriately in a timely fashion. We don't send Susie home or something like that. And note that I haven't even touched on the FMLA. In my little example here, it's not even FMLA qualifying. We can't run the FMLA concurrently in this situation because the Pittsburgh Paid Sick Days Act and the Allegheny County Act are much broader than the FMLA. So while we normally strive to run all these leave laws concurrently, there are situations like this where we can't because typically this isn't going to qualify as an FMLA leave. What does this mean the person's also going to get if you're an FMLA employer? More than 12 weeks, right? They're going to get for their step grandfather, whatever time they have under Pittsburgh or Allegheny County. And then if they have another issue, maybe they have a baby themselves or they break their leg or whatever it is, they get FMLA leave. So there isn't a solution to prevent that. There's only a solution for education to recognize that so that you don't run afoul of the law. Again, manager mistakes, the top one there, training, right? Not running it up the flagpole. Too friendly. The off-the-record conversations used to kill us when we were trying to defend a case because sometimes the manager, Joe or Sally or whoever, was really friendly with Susie and would know things about Susie that would qualify for leave, but didn't bother to tell anybody because the employee didn't want it broadcast across the company to HR. And that's exactly where it should have been broadcast to, was to HR. That's a big problem. They ask all the wrong questions, not usually maliciously. Gosh, Ann, you've been out a lot on leave. What's wrong? Are you okay? What's happening? They might mean it from the bottom of their heart that they're concerned about me who's been on leave or how I'm progressing or what treatment I'm getting or whatever it is. That's not really what they should be doing. And I'm not saying they shouldn't have compassion, be like, hey, how are you doing? That doesn't concern me, but they often dive deeper than that. Sometimes it is out of frustration that they're asking the questions too, and that's more problematic. They get problems from their managers, and that's tough. Their manager is riding their back to do whatever, and they've got this conflict of saying, hey, I've got this employee who's out all the time. I can't get this done. And that answer is not accepted by upper management. That's a problem too. And again, that has to do with education. That has to do with the company culture and ethics, right? not believing certain situations. Now, sometimes they're absolutely right. These managers are like, hey, I don't believe that Ann is out for her mental health, or because her kid has issues or whatever the concern is. If that's the case, I have no problem with them reporting that to HR that, hey, X, Y, and Z happened, which makes me doubt that Ann really has a need for leave. Do we start hiring private investigators for everybody that we have doubts about? Probably not. But if we're large enough and have the money and we have an abuser, right? Not somebody we're just frustrated with because they're out, but somebody who we really think is abusing the system, that's the time you talk to counsel and talk about looking into getting surveillance or another opinion or whatever it is that we think we want to do when the medical certification might be up, or even in the middle of it if we think circumstances have changed. Frustration leads to discrimination, right? So Bob's real frustrated with Ann because she keeps missing, because she says she has anxiety. He's not even sure he believes it in mental health disorders or whatever to begin with. And so Bob stops giving Ann the quality assignments. That's discrimination. And that's a problem. Or it stops inviting me to the company lunches or whatever it is. Those are all problems that they should be trained to watch for. Okay. Common leave processes, mistakes, not escalating it quickly enough, relying on really outmoded ways to track things in today's world. We shouldn't have, the pencil and time card type of situation. The policies are inconsistent in how we apply them. And remember, generally, what we want from leave is we want to run the leaves concurrently. It's not always possible, but you want to look and say, I am subject to whatever laws it is, the FMLA, maybe not, the ADA, workers' comp, maybe different state laws, maybe different local laws, whatever. And you want them all to run concurrently, usually with your PTO or vacation or sick. And so there can be some little exceptions to that, but generally that's what you want. And so one of the questions that most people don't have their house in order on is the policy in the first place to have everything running concurrently. And you want that to be in place so that in the vast majority of situations, they run concurrently. I mentioned this during the seminar, but it's worth repeating again. I have seen policies where we run almost everything concurrently, but we leave the person with a couple of PTO days at the end of any leave, because if I have a baby or I come down with cancer on January 1 and I run through all my PTO concurrent with the FMLA, and now I have 9 months of the year to get through when I come back in 12 weeks, that's a harsh reality for somebody who's had a medical problem. So sometimes I do see a situation where we leave a little PTO left over, and that can be okay. Someone asked, what if you have unlimited PTO? So first of all, you're in an extremely rare category because you are extremely generous. That's going to be guided by policy. And I came from a firm that had basically unlimited PTO for certain classes of employees. And that can be extremely difficult when you get someone who either has a really long-term health consideration, they're terminally ill, but they're not going to leave us within 12 weeks. Or you get an abuser who's using it. So PTO, I would suggest that you put some guardrails on an unlimited PTO situation, which is what we ultimately did. If you have short-term disability, you want to reflect that at some point that unlimited PTO is going to be supplanted by the short-term disability if that's appropriate. That is often appropriate when it's the employee's own health condition. If it's the employee's child's health condition, then that's never going to happen. You need to think about how that looks when you get somebody who has that long-term health condition. And maybe it's your biggest rainmaker, your biggest sales guy. and you want to support them and you're okay because they brought millions in, so you don't care if they're out for a while. But put guardrails on the classes of employees. You can't just cherry pick, oh, I want Ann, but you can cherry pick in most situations the class of employees. So all executives or all sales guys or whatever it is. But you want to put guardrails around what you're doing. And then keep in mind that the laws like Pittsburgh Paid Sick Days Act will apply to everybody, whether you choose them to have unlimited PTO or not. But unlimited PTO is extremely rare. It does need some guardrails. And that, if you say only the executives are eligible for it, that can be somewhat problematic when the receptionist finds out and the receptionist has terminal cancer and everybody liked her and nobody wants to see that happen to her, to be in a situation where she has no income. So you either do it and you do it with some guardrails, or you just know you've opened yourself up to a free-for-all, basically. Okay, missing state law or local requirements, poor documentation practices. Really, especially if you have somebody who you think is an abuser, you ought to be looking at that and saying, gosh, maybe we aren't going to call out surveillance, but maybe we're going to get a second opinion on our dime. Maybe we're going to challenge this a little bit more if we think we have an abuser, and there's good reasons to do that. One, we should save our resources for the people who are abusing this. We don't put everybody through a horrific drill. But if we have somebody who's abusing it, we ought to look at it more closely. Put our resources, time, effort into the person who is the abuser, because we don't want other people to see that, other employees to be like, well, they give time off to anybody, and we all know Ann's faking it. You don't want that kind of morale situation either. So you focus on the ones that are a problem, not because they're using it correctly, but because they're abusing the system somehow. All right, multi-state leave challenges. Again, if you're sitting there and you're a company, let's say you have the 10 employees, so you don't have FMLA, and you're in Allegheny County, what could happen to you shortly? Ann has a baby. Her and her husband, who also works for you, get 18 weeks of paid leave. Or her domestic partner. There are some guardrails around who's considered a domestic partner, but you need to think about that, right? You're a small company. If you lose Ann and her domestic partner, who are both your employees, and we know a lot of companies have relatives working. Maybe not because I had a baby, maybe because I took in another foster child or a grandchild was placed with me, or I stand what we call in loco parenti to somebody, which is really, really, really broad. It means I just stand in the position of somebody who I act as a parent to. So that's just about any minor under the sun that could be. How does that look? How are you going to handle that? How does that interact with your given policies? A lot of companies don't update their policies to reflect that things should be run concurrently. They don't reflect the new laws either. And so if you have a handbook that's 5 years old and you're in Allegheny County in Pittsburgh or have multi-jurisdictional sites, your handbook's probably out of date. If you haven't been tracking and updating it. And that means you're probably not running things when you can concurrently. All right, how do you reduce risk? We talked about this a little bit. Reducing risk doesn't mean you change necessarily the outcome. Intermittent leave is always going to be there. It's always going to be a challenge, and it's always going to be a frustration. But you do need to track things like that. You need the documentation to be correct. Are you handing out the right FMLA WH-380 series forms to everybody? Are you doing that consistently? Are you using the right timelines? Do you have something to track it? What do you do if you don't get the medical certification back in 15 days? The employee communication piece of that, both in communicating that they have rights as well as responsibilities that they need to fulfill. And some of them won't like it that Ann's off intermittently. but we got to make sure they understand that their job is on the line if they can't behave themselves in the workplace with respect to that. It's not their role to treat Ann differently or be disgusted with Ann because she's on an intermittent leave. That's tough to control, but it needs to be done. Visibility, right? Reporting visibility so that the employee knows what they have left too, right? That can be confusing for the employee. In an ideal world, you want this to be automated and have support because oftentimes, how many hats are you wearing in life? A lot, right? And that becomes really challenging as you go through life, trying to make sure that you're covering all your bases. And that's tough. The smaller you are, the more likely you are wearing multiple hats and you need help. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Emily and she can talk about some other solutions here. Thank you, everyone. If you have questions, I'm going to stick around too.
Thanks so much, Anne. And what a great start to kick us off. As you can see, there's quite a few different things to be keeping in mind when it comes to the leave of absence processes and requirements, state and federally. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. And I will need you to stop sharing yours. Thank you. And we're going to roll right into how our leave management services are available to support you, keeping up with the ever-changing requirements and even tracking the administrative process. All right. And can I get a thumbs up from you that you can see my screen?
Yes, I can. I'm sorry. All my
Perfect.
little
Thank you.
icons moved to the bottom and I couldn't figure out where they went for a second there.
Thank you so much. I just
Yes,
had
I
the
can see
same
your
problem.
screen. You're all good.
Thank you. So here we have our leave management administration process. So this is going to be a great way for us to show you from start to finish what happens when an employee needs to take a leave of absence. And so we're starting off with this flow here, but then after we're going to roll into the technology presentation to show you how the technology actually works, what it looks like, feels like, etc. So first and foremost, we are starting off with our first, what I like to call your educational bubble. This bubble represents, the very beginning where an employee, for example, needs to take a leave request. They've never done this before, so they're not quite sure what to do, how to do it, what they can expect, how to best prepare. We're here to help. And so we are of just a phone call, email, or even text away to support this employee prepare. And then on the other side of that, the employer is going to be able to make these leave requests on their behalf as well. All of this is completely configured. Um, and this is going to be, oh, I see in the chat, it looks like someone's having a hard time hearing me. Anne, can you still hear me?
Emily, I can hear you loud and clear, although I am a
Okay.
technical jinx, but I can hear you okay.
Okay, perfect. I just saw that I can hear now. Okay, thank you, Anne.
Okay.
All right. Perfect. So hopping right back in. So our employer can do this leave request on behalf of the employee as well. Again, this is fully configurable to the client's requirements, or I should say their preferences, but the employer can reach out to help prepare. So, how do I help my employees prepare to make this leave? How do I keep track of what my requirements are? What are my requirements? How do I put these leave processes together, best practices, everything. We're here to help. Okay. Next, we have the very first start of submitting a leave request. So the employee or the employer can do so on their behalf again. Make the leave request via portal, phone, or email. Now, again, I'm going to show you that portal clickable demo in just a moment once we get through this flow. But the phone and email aspects are going to be helpful for any of our employees who may not be so tech savvy, or perhaps it's just in that moment, it's more convenient to be able to just email or call, to make this leave request. So we have quite a few options. Our representatives supporting this service are providing support in English and Spanish, and our documentation is available upon request in Spanish as well, predominantly coming in English by default. So we're going to then, once that employee or employer submits that leave request, our team is going to generate the leave kit. Now, I mentioned that this service is very customizable, and that really kicks in here with that leave kit. Not only are we bringing to the table, the requirements of you state federally due to your size, so on and so forth, but we're also going to be customizing this to your preferences for maybe you want to be more direct in your verbiage. Maybe you'd like to be more friendly. That's all customizable in our implementation process with you so that when it's time to take the leave, everything's, ready to rock and roll. Now, those leave kits can also be customized in a way where, we see this often. If a client would like to share with us the job description for that employee, down the road, this can be helpful. So if the doctor needs to give a doctor's note, for example, to have that employee return to work, the doctor already knows what's expected of them because it's in that job description, right? So again, fully customizable here. Now we generate that leave kit, send it on over to that employee, and the employee will complete the leave kit and submit it back to us via the online portal or email within the required time frame. Now, this is another bubble that our team will support with because employees may have questions. Again, if this is their first time, they've never done this before, they may not be quite sure how to start, where to go, how to answer something. We are just a phone call, email, text away, and here to support. Now, we're also going to be, once we receive that leave kit completed, we're also going to be approving and denying those leave requests. And the approval process is very straightforward. As I mentioned in that implementation phase, we are getting to know, what's required of you, of course. But then, if you have any more generous policies, that becomes our quote unquote rule, which allows us to then approve by default, right? We know automatically that that's going to be an approval. The denying is going to be a little bit more difficult, and we never want to take away the ability for our clients to make an exception. So we will run that denial by you and your team to say, hey, here's what we received from the employee. Here's everything we have. We would recommend denying. You could say, that sounds great. I agree. Let's go ahead and deny. And we remain the bad guy, and we're going to go ahead and deny that request. Or on the other side of that, if you say, actually, I'd like to make an exception, let's go ahead and approve it. We're going to say, also great, let's go ahead and we'll approve it for you. We're then going to be tracking everything from continuous to intermittent, reduced schedule leaves. We're monitoring that return to work timeline. We are going to be really just helping every step of the way. If an employee, for example, needs to extend their leave, for example, we're going to say, that sounds great. We need you to go ahead and get that doctor's note for us. Go ahead and upload it into the portal or email it back to us, and we'll get everything squared away, right? We are also going to be configuring all of the notifications. So if you want to be notified, if you just want manager supervisors notified every step of the way, or just specific parts of this process, again, completely configurable. But we're most importantly letting that employee know, you have X amount of days before you have to come back to work. Here's what you can expect. Here's the paperwork you need you to complete, so on and so forth. Now, we're also going to be supporting with accommodation request and ADA compliance. So we can't accept or deny an accommodation request. However, we will be able to support and walk you through best practices, what's reasonable versus what isn't, and giving you that guidance along the way. And accommodations will be documented within the platform, which we'll get to in just a moment. All right. And most importantly, here to help at any point throughout the way. So here you'll see the Leave Helpline highlighted. This is where we're here to support at any point throughout the whole process as well. So now I'm going to go ahead and pivot on over to our technology. Now this is going to be just showing you what it looks like when an employee, first and foremost, in this environment, we're going to see what it looks like for the employee to make a leave request. Then we're going to switch gears and see what it looks like for this individual, Grace, as a supervisor or manager, what it would look like for her to see her team. So this is where we're going to start. My cases here, as you can see, Grace has not uploaded or submitted, I should say, any leave requests yet. So this is blank, but as she begins to add new cases, you'll start seeing them stack here like a feed. So we're going to go ahead and start with requesting a new case. Now here you'll see Grace Pitts has a employee ID number here. She also has the ability to request a new leave, request a new accommodation, or even update an open case that she currently has. You'll also see here blurbs along the way to give hints because employees may not know the difference between a leave versus an accommodation. And so this helps give those employees hints so that they can, just determine what's the best fit for what they're looking for. We're requesting a new leave today. You'll see here, Grace's information is grayed out. That's because we have a integration between payroll. So there's a 180 integration pulling employee demographic information over from the payroll into our absence tracker software. And so this information is automatically populating for Grace. You'll see here her in payroll, her platform does not have personal email address listed, so she has the opportunity to add one here, or I do not have a personal email address. Do you require alternate contact info for this case? Yes or no? And if yes, then here is the opportunity to upload this information. This is great for just record keeping. For example, if she's going to go take care of a sick loved one, or if she is going to rehab, this is a great forwarding address. Confirm and continue. Now, this is what I like to call like your word bank. So this is for Grace. There, this is a California example, but this employee can only see what's applicable to her. So this is completely configured on the back end so that again, Grace can only see what she should be able to see here. We're actually taking a pregnancy maternity leave here. Medical complications, yes or no. Hospitalized, yes or no. Expected delivery date, actual delivery date, bonding, yes or no. Bonding start date and end date. Now, we have the ability to select absence details, consecutive, intermittent, reduced. You have the blurb here along the way, again, giving that hint so that the employee can figure out what is the best type of leave that she should be taking at this time. Confirm and continue. And this isn't a great blurb. I think it's important to highlight. Select the expected start and end date for your absence. These dates can be adjusted later on, so an estimate is okay, right? So this is going to be important for her, so she can say what she thinks it's going to be, and then come back and correct it once it's time. Start and end date, confirm and continue. Now, this is going to be our summary page where Grace can see the snapshot of everything that she's selected so far before she goes ahead and submits this request. Now, Grace can see based off of all of the selections that she's made and on the back end how the system is configured automatically on her confirmation page, she's able to see her case number and her eligible policies. Now, the case number is going to also be aligned with a case manager. For every employee's case, they're going to be working with one individual as a case manager to support them. That familiarity or along the way. I think it adds a nice touch. And then your eligible policies, based off of what she selected, are running FMLA and short-term disability in tandem. Here are those dates. Your request has successfully been submitted and will be reviewed by your case manager. You can view your case details at any time on My Cases page. She can add a new request if applicable, or go ahead and close and view cases. Now we're full circle back to where we began. I mentioned before Grace had never had a leave case before, so she had a blank section here. Well, now we just created one. So now she's going to again start seeing all of them stack here like a feed. Now, seeing here Grace Pitts, again, her case numbers here, it's an open status, the dates, return to work, the reason, the type is consecutive. She can add an attachment here or just open it on up fully. And she can again see the policies here, add personal information if she didn't before, add an attachment. Here she can go ahead and browse her computer or drag and drop the attachment, add a type, add a description, save and close. Now I do want to just quickly note here before we wrap up the employee view, because we're going to move on over to the manager and supervisor view now for Grace, but this is fully configurable as well. Some clients want managers and supervisors to be able to see those attachments, but some don't because it can sometimes hold sensitive medical information. That's also fully configurable too, making sure that only those who should be seeing attachments have that authorization. So we're going to go ahead and save and close. Now, again, we are seeing Grace as the manager supervisor view. And so Grace has a number of employees on her team. She can see each and every employee, their ID number, how many open cases they have. And we have this set up so that Grace can request a new case for Joanna as well. Now, we're going to use Joanna Aniston as our example today. Joanna's role is a service rep. She has 3 open cases, and now you can see kind of that snapshot here. So, available time off, you'll see FMLA has 12 weeks total as an FMLA, bucket. She has 12 weeks available because she's used 0. California Family Rights Act, 12 weeks 12 weeks total, available 12 weeks because she's used 0, so on and so forth. These are, just to be very clear, these are only, both sides actually, are related to the leaves of absence. So not to be confused or used with like the PTO time, any other kind of time off. It's just the job protected leaves of absence. So intermittent, consecutive, and those different cases. So time off request, this is going to actually be aligning with an intermittent leave down below, I believe, for about 3 hours. But you'll see again those snapshots here, nice and easy. And then scrolling down, we'll see our feed. Now you'll also see Joanna has quite a few consecutive leaves where Grace can add an attachment for the employee. She can view any attachments, again, because we have that set up. And then looking at an intermittent leave, we have the ability to add an attachment, view an attachment, submit an intermittent absence, and also edit an intermittent absence. Okay. So again, fully configurable. We just like Grace to have the ability to help those employees out. Now, wrapping us up, I do like to just quickly touch on our My Reports section. Now, this is going to be super helpful. We are all about transparency, so you have the ability to log into the platform to pull reports as well. So you can pull a report by detail, by office location, by reason. You have so many different filters to apply here. And then you also have the ability to set up recurring automatic reports. So say you have a weekly payroll and you want a weekly snapshot report sent to you, you can totally set that up so that you're receiving that every week to get a good visibility. Other managers, supervisors can also be included on this, but it's just a great way to keep things in, top of mind. Now, just to address the integration piece again, there is a 180 integration. So from payroll to the software, there's going to be that pull over of information for the employee demographic information. Now, it doesn't quite speak back to payroll automatically. And so at this time, there are a couple of options that you can certainly move forward with to make sure we're getting it into the payroll. First and foremost, the most popular, I would say, is your employees are already used to using that time and attendance tracker to make your time off requests for PTO, any other sick buckets that you may have. Now, with that, you can also set it up so that our team will tell the employee and anybody else who needs to be included on those notifications what type of leave, how long it's been approved for. And that employee can then go into the time and attendance, select the right quote unquote bucket, whether it's paid or unpaid, what have you, and then enter the time, submit the request, and then the workflows will go to the appropriate in-house individual to approve that. And now we've already approved it from a compliance perspective. Really, that approval workflow process is just to make sure, looks good. It lines up with what was approved by the iSolved professionals, and then it speaks to payroll like any other time off would. Now, we also have the ability to set up, again, customizing that leave kit so that employees are notified in advance how they will be expected to enter that time into the time attendance section once it's been approved. So just making sure we're communicating that to the employees. We will support you with all of that as well, trainings and everything in between. Now, another option would be if you want to be the one to enter it into payroll. Now, I think that that's less popular because most people want to take as much of this off of their plate as possible, but it is an option where our team would notify you, here's what's been approved, here's the bucket, everything you need to know, and then you would go in and enter that into the payroll. Now, the third option is going to be, I mentioned these reports are running automatically. So we could set it and so that there's very minimal manipulation. You would receive the report and it's almost it's basically ready for you to import like a time entry grid into payroll. So it's a minimal manipulation. You then import into payroll, and then it's good to go. Right. So there's quite a few different ways, and our team can certainly walk through this with you. What would make the most sense for you, and just make sure it aligns with what you're looking for. Okay. And that does wrap us up for our leave management services presentation of the technology and the service itself. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
Okay, we did get a few questions. So let me get those. Okay, so someone asked, and this is a great question, where can employers find management training on the Pittsburgh Sick Days Act? So a couple of thoughts for you. If you look at the City of Pittsburgh website on this, they do have guidance available. That guidance is pretty good. You can look at that. We as an organization have done multiple webinars, and our webinars are available. With respect to when it originally came out, the requirements there, we've talked about it in terms of other contexts. We do try to make things that we do relevant. We've also talked about the updates to it. So January 1, City of Pittsburgh increased the accrual method as well as the amount of leave available. So my recommendation is feel free to dig through our archives and look for some of those, and also look at the City of Pittsburgh guidance. It's much more user-friendly than the ordinance there.
I'll also add too, with the
Yeah,
addition of leave management services, our team will support you in educating your management teams to make sure that everybody's speaking the same language, they know what's required, and everybody's good to go as well.
thank you so much, Emily. That's perfect. Okay, somebody asked, and I'm not going to do these questions in order because I'm not talented enough to do that. Are the slides available anywhere? Yes, we post everything. I don't do it because CTR doesn't let me touch anything that has technology like that. And so they are available. They will be out along with the recorded webinar. We do that for all compliance webinars. So you will definitely see that come out. Emily, I think this is for you. Can employees easily add attachments and access this via mobile devices?
Yes, and thank you for that, Anne. I'm going to go back into, apologies, my clickable demo. I'm not quite sure where it sits, but it's in here. Okay, perfect. Add attachments. They can browse their computer and upload, or they can even drag and drop, and then they're ready to rock and roll. It is mobile and desktop friendly. Absolutely.
Great. Just so you know, the webinars, for those of you asking, are in our resource library on CTR's webpage. And in fact, Kara from CTR put a link there. It's ctrhcm.com/resources. One other question I think we have here, what is a good resource for multi-state leave requirements or other employment law changes? So obviously for the leave requirements, we have Emily here. In addition to that, when I if I was an employer and I knew I had folks, let's say in 3 or 4 states, I would start following the web pages of some of the large firms there that are labor and employment management side, labor and employment law firms. They will give you a heads up as to what's happening. So for instance, if Topeka, Kansas increases their minimum wage, that's going to be something that would make the news for those firms out there. And so that can be one way of handling it. Okay, let me make sure we don't have anything else. Nope, we don't. So thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Emily. And again, we'll be back next month with yet another compliance webinar. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Oh, and I did just want to add before we lose everyone, we will have our, if you want to share your screen on the slide and for the complimentary leave audit.
Oh, yes. Let me attempt to get that back up. Let's see.
So if you are interested, basically, if you're interested in just learning more about how your compliance stands, if you know, oh, There we go. Where we
Actually did it with
stand
technology.
in
There we
support.
go.
Great, love it, Anne. So you can go ahead and scan the QR code here and schedule that complimentary leave risk audit at your convenience. This will also,
Thanks,
to
Emily.
Anne's point earlier, be in uploaded on the website. So this if you don't catch it now, you can certainly go back and grab that QR code as well. Awesome. Thanks, Anne.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.